We are live and I am frozen, but hopefully you can still hear me.
I can hear you.
Oh, good. Welcome to another episode of Leadership Live. And I'm here with Chris Pinkowski. I'm JJ Hardy. We're both leadership coaches. But Chris, how you doing today?
I'm good, JJ. It's Friday. We're early in the third quarter of the year, but we just finished celebrating America's birthday. So July, as far as I'm concerned, is America's birthday month. And yeah, hanging in there, doing well. How about you?
Doing well. It's interesting you say that because a lot of people can also pose the argument that, just about, what was it, 3 weeks prior to July 4th is actually when they finalized the Declaration of Independence. So some people actually think that's this nation's birthday, not the day that
Okay,
they signed it. So that's always an interesting conversation with people.
it
But
is.
but I agree. I think the day they signed it, it was kind of official, and that's the birth of the country.
Yep.
So wonderful. But otherwise, things are going good here. Life is wonderful. I'm excited to talk about effective communication with you today. Such an important topic. You
Oh,
know, the way people communicate with one another, that's only part of it. In my opinion, effective communication is more of the process of making people feel like they're heard, understood, and acknowledged in the workplace, and understanding where they stand. Um, and we'll obviously dive deeper into that. But what do you think?
I think I've always said that communication is the foundation of leadership. And one of the things that people often overlook about communication is they think that it's exactly what you just said, right? It's making sure that your people hear, understand, and are clear on what's going on. But communication is a two-way street. It's also your ability to hear what others are saying to you and being able to have that dialogue, you understanding the feedback that you're getting from your downstream people. So often I have to remind people that communication is about the way that we provide and receive information. It's a continuous loop. And that's really why it's so important from a leadership standpoint, because listening is so important as a leader.
Correct. And actually, that is what I meant. I was talking about from the employees point of view. You're
Okay.
right. Leaders tend to think that now I'm in charge, my voice matters here, and now I need to drive results into the ground and make sure people are doing what they're supposed to do. And that's not it.
No,
I mean, obviously, there's got to be balance there because you got to make sure work is getting done. You do have to drive results, but the way that you do that is through follow up, but having conversations with people about what difficulties they're having if they're falling short, and then helping them to improve. And you can't do that without also asking that crucial question: is what can I do to better support you in your role? And that's not just in the day-to-day operations. That's also when you get them one-on-one and you're doing that counseling or performance review or whatever the case may be.
that's right. Um, you know, the old saying is we have two ears and one mouth for a reason. And it's something that I have to remind leaders. What's funny is that it's not just a new leader thing, it's even seasoned leaders. I've got to remind them that, hey, you know what? You have to shut your mouth and listen to your people, and you're going to be more effective the less you speak. So, get those ears working, get them checked out if you need to, but that's such a huge part of communication.
You're right. It's probably the most crucial part of communication because that's how you build relationships and earn trust.
Yep,
And to go a little bit deeper into what you said, that is called active listening for the audience here.
that's
And
right.
Stephen Covey said it best, seek to understand, then to be understood. So when I think of active listening, it's the art of when you ask a question of another person or they're trying to give you feedback even without you asking a question. You're listening to what they're saying. Now,
Mhm.
There's that little voice in your head that wants to jump in there and interject. But and if you really want to let that person feel like they're valued and you want to have a great conversation with another person, you got to put your ego aside, and whatever comment that you're trying to blurt out in the middle of that other person talking, and not do it and just listen to what they're saying. And when you respond, that's not your opportunity to say what you were wanting to blurt out that entire time. Respond to what they actually said with a response that makes sense, and lets them know that you're actually part of that conversation. They're just not over there running their mouth.
Yeah, and you know what happens there is when people are listening solely to respond, they're not fully listening. That it takes away the active part. So your goal is not to always offer a response right away. It is to take in the information and process it. And like you said, make sure that your response is in relation to what they just said to you.
Yep.
Because if your whole goal is just to get your point across or the counterpoint to whatever the other person is saying, you've already lost the battle.
Yeah, you did. And, sometimes that response is nothing more than, oh, tell me more about that.
Yeah.
And that is probably the most valuable statement that you could possibly say to another person when you're trying to practice that art of active listening. Because, by the way, that's not the easiest thing to do in the world. Oftentimes, we get caught up as individuals and we're nervous about these. By the way, I'm in the middle of reading a wonderful book. We're always nervous about these crucial conversations, but at the end of the day, you have to be in it. And if you're not in the conversation, that means you're out of the conversation. As
Mhm.
easy as that is to understand, when you're in the moment, it's not always the easiest to understand then, because you have your nerves there, you have all kinds of other stuff going on, and you got to slow down and live in the moment, which is
Yeah.
what many people have difficulty doing. And that's why these conversations don't go anywhere. That's why communication fails. It's not always self-interest. Sometimes you just have this undying need to be right. And that could be ego. It could be maybe you just got your ass chewed by your boss, and now you're in this mode where everything has to go the right way or you're going to get fired.
That's
So,
right.
I mean, there are so many things that play into that. I just kind of want to hear your thoughts on it.
Yes. And you and I have talked about ego so many times and how it's so important to subordinate that. Communication is one of those main areas. Like
Yep.
if you're so hung up in being right, then let me tell you, you're going to fail as a leader because you can't and will not always be right. So, yeah, it has to be a give and take. And yeah, it could be a variety of reasons that someone just wants to fire off a response. I always recommend to people, like, before you respond to anything, count to 3 in your head. Just count to 3, and you're gonna diffuse whatever someone else just said that may have pissed you off. 3 seconds is gonna help you cool off, but it's also going to help you reframe, "All right, this is I thought I was gonna respond this way, but what you just said warrants a different response." So live in the moment. You just said it. You've got to live in the moment and not assume that the answer that you planned to give 5 minutes ago is still the right answer to give.
And you know what, people, if you're struggling with that, there is nothing wrong with, in the middle of the conversation, thinking out loud when you respond. Oh, I like what you just said, Chris. So maybe when you respond, saying something like, man, I was getting ready to say something completely off in left field, but you just made me think of this. And so what do you think about that? But I want to share something with you, Chris. So I'm in a course over at Indiana Wesleyan University right now. It's called the Catalyst course. It's wonderful. I'll probably tag it on this live stream. But there was a gentleman by the name of Kevin Wachtel, who he's a big shot over there, but he's had a very interesting career in corporate and all kinds of different places, and he kind of shared his philosophy. And if it's okay with you, I would like to share what he told us, because I
Let it
think
rip.
it relates directly to what we're doing. He said, when it comes to dealing with others, you always have to have heart, and that's an acronym. So H, always hear and understand people. E, even if you disagree, don't make me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
A is acknowledge the greatness within me. R is remember to look for my loving intentions. And when when you think of work, you may not always think of love, but when I think of that statement, I do think that you have to have the heart to care for other people. Otherwise, you're going to really struggle when you go into a management position, because people need to be heard. And if you don't care about them, then you're not going to care about what they say. You're not going to care about what they do. And so it bleeds into that. So that love is just showing general care and understanding for other people.
Mm-hmm.
And then T is tell me the truth with compassion.
Okay.
And if we're talking about effective communication, I think all of those play into that, because compassion is what it's all about. I mean, oftentimes when we end up being in charge, we get nervous and we want to bring out a bigger hammer, because we want to make sure things go a certain way, and we want to feel like we want to be in control, and we want to make sure that nothing fails, and if it does fail, it falls back on you. And by the way, that's true. However, if you communicate effectively with your people and you let them know what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, and then you receive feedback openly on a regular basis, the things that you're worried about being in control of, the likelihood of them being more successful, maybe not in the way that you expected, but in the way they naturally fall into place, is going to be much more likely. Thoughts?
Yeah. No, I I want to touch on something that you said as you were going through what that HEART acronym means,
Sure.
and which it really just stood out to me, but not making someone else wrong in a conversation or in a, hey, we're dealing with an issue here. And as a leader, from a communication standpoint, pointing out that someone is wrong, like, you know, being the hammer all the time is not going to get you as far as you think it is. So it ties into the compassion that was also part of that acronym. But, you know, I like to say, let's attack the issue, not the person. Hey, if there's something wrong here, we all know that there's something wrong. And me pointing a finger at you, JJ, like, hey, JJ, you know what? What's that do? That makes you get defensive. You turn your ears off. So now you're not going to hear what I'm saying. So if we can approach things in a way of like, hey, look, I'm not going to call you out. There may be times in a one-on-one conversation where someone needs to be like, hey, you're not getting it here, but you just effed up. And I'm here to help you. We're going to get past this together. You don't do that in a group, but if you can communicate the right way about something that happened, you don't have to overtly blame someone. They're going to recognize it. They're going to be sitting around the table or in front of that screen and be like, oh man, that was me that did that. And you know what? I'm so thankful that JJ didn't call me out in front of the group. I recognize it. He knows it was me. I know it was me. But that really jumped out at me as you were going through that list of what makes up the acronym HEART. Is not really going after someone and making them wrong,
Right.
because you don't win anything by always being right.
Sure. And I mean, outside of somebody being late or somebody cursing somebody else out at work or something like that, I think a healthier approach when there's a shortfall somewhere at work is to say what part of the process failed this person
Mhm.
first
Yes.
before you dig into what that person did wrong, because chances are most mistakes can be fixed with a process. If you're effectively communicating, if you are having regular training on the things that happen at work, if you're doing everything that you could possibly think of to mitigate as many risks as possible and build relationships at work, chances are there's a failure in the process. And
Right.
that's okay. Don't get caught up in that, why are we doing this? Well, that's what we always done. That's what we've always done sort of attitude, because that's going to fail you. And,
Every time.
I don't I don't really like to use the word fail too many times, but having that mindset will fail you. You always have to be open to the possibilities that something you're doing could use some improvements, it could change a little bit to become better.
Yep. Uh, JJ, so what are some things that you help leaders with to improve their ability to communicate with others?
Well, so I mean, I have in my company right now. I currently have a course, and we do focus on a lot of the things. But I think creating a culture around all of the things that we talk about on a regular basis with leadership is one. But I mean, I talk about comfortable and uncomfortable things. And, I do trainings on this because we would do one off trainings on this through all of my careers that I've had, both military and the jobs I've worked in the civilian workforce. And they're around things like emotional intelligence, team building, effective communication. What's a good counseling process? How often should you give feedback to one another? What are the most effective ways to give feedback to one another? Difficult conversations. If you just bring awareness and you advocate it, you force these things a little bit, and you build a culture around those things at work, I think that eventually you'll build an entire community of people at work that are more likely to keep an open mind and want to work with one another.
Yeah. Yeah, building that community, super important, and having the same set of standards, practices across the board, um, gets everyone, speaking the same language, and, it's much easier, language communication. Right now we're in that same sphere here.
Yeah.
So, I really like that.
Well, I think it's important. The only reason I created the course is because people take their high performers, throw them into these management positions, and then expect them to sink or swim. It's not
Right.
fair. I mean, if you're not addressing the elephant in the room, and then you're not addressing the elephant in the room. And people need this information, because if you just leave them to figure it out, it's not going to help them. I like doing this live stream with you. I love
Me
doing
too.
my two podcasts that I have. People need to believe in themselves. They need to understand what it takes to succeed. And in the work environment, the where the rubber meets the road, that is the most crucial spot where you need to be informing on a constant basis on what they need to be doing and what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong.
Yep.
Because if you're not helping those brand new supervisors or managers, then the chances of the work getting done in a way that's successful, or even working within the process that you're trying to put in place, it's much less, because those people are probably going to be focusing on the numbers instead of the people.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Uh, One of the things that I do, so, my leadership development work is all around this framework that I call high impact leadership.
Mhm.
High impact leadership has 5 principles. The first principle is communicate for clarity. There's a tool that, or a framework that I created. It's called the 5W framework, that is all about communication. It can be used when you're delivering information. It could also be used to trigger you to ask questions. And those 5 W's are: number one, what are we doing? Right? Very simple. What is it that we're doing? The goal that we're trying to achieve, the strategic outcome, whatever. Why are we doing it? That why is super important because now people are able to put the pieces together. All right, I understand why this is important to the bottom line of the organization, to our growth. I always say, Todd, you have to have a why for the company and for the person. Why is it important to you, Joe Snuffy, to be doing the best job that you can be doing in this project? Third W, when? When is it going to be done? When are we going to be checking in for progress reports, etc.? Fourth W, where? Where is this work being completed? Is it on site? Is it remote? Whatever. And then finally, the fifth W is who. Who is ultimately held accountable for getting this stuff done? Who has the authority to make decisions, etc. But there's no W, there's no H in there. I'm not telling anybody how to do something. I'm framing it with these five things. What are we doing? Why, when, where, and who? Now, the who comes up with this is how we're going to execute. At the same time, when someone is letting me know about something, I'm going to go through those five W's in my head. And if none of them are clear, I'm going to ask, okay, so tell me again, why are we doing this? Where's this getting done? Who's accountable for leading this? So, that 5W framework works in both directions. It's a providing and receiving information, but I wanted to get that out there for people that are watching and listening because it's super simple. It's five freaking easy W's that you can use and really boost the effectiveness of your communication.
I mean, I love that. And I love it because it's the most basic thing that we learned, even I learned it back when I was in high school. My grandfather taught that to me. Always think of the five W's, JJ. Okay.
Mhm.
And the how, it depends on the situation, but most times I usually ask people for the five W's and the H if they're briefing back to me. I don't necessarily, when I'm briefing other people and I'm talking about work, I don't include that H in there either. I think that's not productive to somebody's growth. I think that if they can create their own plan, then they can figure out the how as they go, or
Yep.
they can figure out the how before they start. So I absolutely love that framework, and it makes it so. I I also like the KISS acronym. Keep it stupid simple, and I think you just did that. Why
Mhm.
reinvent the wheel if it's already out there?
That's right.
So
You know,
go ahead.
something else that's important for leaders is from a communication standpoint, making sure that your people are up to date on whatever information they need. Um, I stole this from General Mattis and I modified it a little bit. In his book, he talks about the communication loop that he used when, he was the commander in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I added one final piece to it, but it's at the end of every day or you're coming out of a meeting, you need to be saying to yourself, what new information did I just receive? Who else needs to receive this information? Have I told them? And then the piece that I added to it is, have I clarified that me and this other person are on the same page? We have the same understanding of the information I just shared. So even that's another simple tool. Like, all right, I just finished up a meeting. What's new? Who else needs to know? Have I told them? Have I confirmed that they understand my understanding of it? But that is a huge part of communication, making sure that everyone knows what the hell is going on.
Yes. And I think another thing that, this isn't necessarily in the nuts and bolts, but it's in the strategy for delivery that I'd like to bring up as well. So I believe in communicating consistently and often.
Mhm.
When you have a team, say it's just you're where the rubber meets the road, and you just have 5 to 10 Joes, and they're out doing the daily work every day. Or if you're remote, same thing, doesn't matter. Yeah, this concept works for both. So making sure that you step up out of your office or step up away from whatever your workspace is, and every day, maybe not talking to everybody on your team, but making sure you're making around to talk to at least some of your team every day, and making sure every week you're talking to your whole team.
Yep.
And you don't lead with, what are you working on? You lead with, how are things going with you? How's your day? What's new with you? Sort of a thing. And you get them comfortable, because when they see the boss walking up, the first thing they think is, oh shit, am I doing the right thing? And you don't want them to have to stress about that. But then
No.
you follow up with, what can I do to support you in what you're doing? Are there any issues going on that I need to know about? And it just takes the amount of stuff that you learn about your people and the things that are going on in whatever lane that you're in charge of that could use improvement on a regular basis. You learn it all when you do that, and you build relationships,
Yes.
which is the most crucial thing. And you may annoy the crap out of your people because they're sick of you talking to them all the time, but they're going to expect it. So they're going to want to say something to you to get you to walk away from them.
Yeah. No, you're right. And especially so, I want to make sure we touch this in the last 4 minutes here, but especially when it's in person, and I think a lot of people have forgotten about this being virtual,
Yep.
but body language. That is also a part of communication, people. Your nonverbal communication is happening more than the words that are coming out of your mouth and the words that are being spoken. So that's something that you also need to pay attention to, because let's take the physical environment. If you're walking up to someone's desk, right, one of your people, and you walk up and you just stand there and fold your arms, you're automatically in a defensive posture, and it puts that other person on the defense. We don't see that on screen as much. And I'll often talk about, like, you need to show that you're engaged. If you're totally virtual, don't just sit back in your chair like this. Don't be farting around with things on your desk. Be engaged, because your body language, your nonverbal communication is so important.
Yes.
So I just wanted to make sure that we at least touched on that in this segment about communication, just how much we have to be focused on what is our body saying to the people that we're trying to communicate with.
And I'm glad you brought up that virtual environment, because that circulating the floor technique actually still works in a virtual environment.
It does.
There is absolutely nothing wrong with either setting appointments up throughout the week with your team, or you probably know their schedule because you see it when you try to book an appointment with them.
Mhm.
But pick this thing up and give them a call.
Right.
Hey, Johnny, how you doing?
Yep.
Just want to know how the family's doing, and if there's anything I can do to be supporting you in your role. Have a 5-minute conversation with them in the same way as you would if you were circulating the floor. Just end it. They know that you care enough to reach out to them, and if you do it enough, they expect it.
Right.
But just before we end the call, I do want to point out that you have to have a feedback system.
Yeah.
So one thing that people do not do a lot, because they get caught up in the day-to-day work, is they don't take time to put people on their schedule to talk to them. It's the performance review process.
Mhm.
Talk to them about what went right, what went wrong, what you could be doing better to support them as a leader, and have a 30 to 40 minute strategy session every month, every 6 months. It doesn't matter, whatever fits in your agenda and your mindset. But if you don't take the regular time to do that, people really do want to know where they stand. And you can't, if you never tell them, then they're constantly wondering. They probably won't ask,
Right.
but you still have to make it a point, because some people know how well they're doing and they don't really want to hear the answer. But and so make sure you're taking time, even if you're a brand new supervisor. Make sure you're taking time, even if it's not part of the policy where you work, to do that, because you're going to have the strongest team there, because people know where they stand and you communicate consistently and often.
Without doubt. Absolutely.
Yep. So, I mean, that we're kind of at the end here. Do you have any closing comments, Chris?
Uh, no, the only thing I would say is that it is super important to have active and ongoing conversation, communication. And it's, again, it's the way that you give and receive information. It's also your nonverbal. So please, everybody, keep that in mind, that it's not just words, it's how you're presenting yourself in a situation that could really dictate the outcome.
Agreed. Well, I really enjoyed this conversation, Chris. People, if you're tuning in live or later on, whatever the case may be, please like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're on YouTube or if you're on any of these other stations that I'm on. I guess it really doesn't matter. But the most important thing is to keep the conversation going, and the only way you can do that is to either share it with your audience with a comment at the top, or comment below so that somebody has a frame of reference.
Yes.
Otherwise, the stuff we talk about is never going to get out there.
That's right.
Chris, I appreciate it. Team out in the audience, I appreciate you. This is Leadership Live. We'll see you in 2 weeks from now.
2 weeks from now. We're out.
Out.